Welcome back for part 2 of the 2008 Acura MDX engine block reassembly. Also see links in the video's description to some of the products used in this video. Alright, so I've got the engine block to where this bank is pointed mostly up. And what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to wipe a little clean engine oil inside each one of these cylinders. Grab a little more. Make sure it's nice and coated. I'm also going to put some inside this sleeve. Okay, so here's one of the piston bowls. I'll put a little bit of clean engine oil on the threads and under the head here. Do that to the other one also. Alright, so here's our piston. And what I'm going to do now, I'm actually going to put a little bit of the driven around here. You can probably just use clean engine oil, that'd be fine also. But this is going to sit for a little while I put everything back together, so I'm going to put some around here. Some of the driven around the outside of the piston. And then also on the bearing, right here. I'm going to do the same thing to the cap bearing. Okay, so I've got this rod journal at bottom dead center, and I'm going to put a little bit of driven GP1 on that also. Make sure it's nice and lubricated. I'm going to spin this a little bit, and we'll put it back into position. That is good. Alright, time to put the piston in. I've got a rubber mallet. We're going to use the end of this to force our piston down the cylinder. So I'm going to grab the piston. Here's right there. Make sure our arrow's pointed forward. Also, I want to check the rings again before I commit. This one's off, so I'm going to fix that one. And this one looks good. Okay. Sounds like the wind's kicking up outside, so I apologize if you hear that. Just like so. Slide this down. Make sure it's nice and centered. You want to make sure your arrow's pointed straight that way, because once we slide this down, it's got to sit right on the crankshaft journal. So I'm going to force this down probably about halfway, and then I'll check it to make sure it's actually going down on the journal. Because the last thing we want to do is get this in there and then have to try to finagle it to get it to go on straight. So I think it's a little off there. Looks like it went in right. I'm just going to make sure it's positioned correctly. Looks like it is. There we go. And that looks pretty good. All right, so we're going to put our cap on now. So you want to make sure you have the number lined up on this side, which I do. And I'll put a bolt in to hold it. Second bolt. Just going to run this down a little bit. All right. Okay, so we're going to tighten this down to 14 foot-pounds on each one of these. Again, that's 12-point socket. Then we need to go an additional 90 degrees. And that one's done. All right, so here's how we look from the top side with the number 1 piston, and we'll continue on with 2 and 3, and then switch to the second bank. All right, so I've got all the pistons installed. I'm going to turn the engine by hand to make sure it's operating smoothly. Make sure they're traveling correctly. Looks like they're good. If you're not replacing the rear main seal, the steps presented are accurate. In my case, I should have removed the cover at the rear of the engine, then replaced the rear main seal before reinstalling the oil pan, as you'll see later. Alright, so we're ready to start putting our oil pan assembly back together. So I'm going to replace this O-ring on the underside of the oil pump. Got a pick tool. Pull it out of here. Here's a new one. Part number is 15221 RYE A01. Genuine Honda. So here is the O-ring on the screen. I would just put it on here instead of putting it here. That way you know that it's not going to get squished. Alright, so before I put the screen on, I'm going to put this baffle on. And you want to make sure you put it on so that it's oriented correctly. That is incorrect. So the RYE should be over on this side. Flip this around. Line up the holes. So this one right here I circled because that's where the screen's bolt's going to go. So I'll put these other 7 in, and then I'll come back to this one. Alright, so I'm going to put the bolts in. And the torque spec is 9 foot-pounds if you want to tighten it down to spec. I'm just going to run it down real quick here. Okay, so I will tighten these to spec just so you can see that, but I don't think it's all that important. I still don't want to make a mistake and not tighten them down enough, especially since this is on the underside of the engine. So I'm just going to tighten it to spec. There's no particular order for tightening the bolts. There we go. Alright, so we're going to put our screen in next. Remember our O-ring on the bottom there, brand new. It's going to go right there. And then this one hole over here, we'll put a bolt in. And once again, 9 foot-pounds is our torque spec. Alright. Alright, so we're going to install the oil pan. I have drawn out where exactly the Honda bond is going to go, so we're going to use this Honda bond. So once I get this on, we're going to throw the oil pan down, and then I'm going to put a few bolts in to kind of secure it, and then we'll tighten the bolts down in the proper sequence. Now there are 6 bolts in the front. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Those are longer bolts, so remember that. So I'm going to get started, get this done. I have cleaned the tube out from my last use. Just use a pick tool. For some reason, I decided to apply the Honda bond on this engine block as a bead instead of spreading it thinly with a putty knife as I've done in the past. The instructions clearly state to spread it thinly. I suggest reading and adhering to the instructions. Probably should have cut the tip a little bit more. Alright, grab the pan. I'll worry about the Honda bond in a second, the tube of it. Sure we're lined up correctly. There are a couple of dowel pins also. I'm not going to show those right now, but I want to make sure those lined up correctly too. I think it's down good, well enough right now. Throw some bolts in. And kind of in the middle here, just for now. Okay, so it's not tight, it's just touching there. Make sure this side is down. There we go. So I think that's good enough for now. You can see there's a little bit of squeeze out here. Maybe you can't pick it up, but I can see squeeze out, which is a good sign that we've got a nice spread there. Okay, so I'm going to put the rest of the bolts in real quick here. That one's not. Alright, so I'm going to quickly go around and tighten these down in the proper sequence. You're supposed to do it in 3 steps. So I guess I'll start with 3 foot-pounds and work my way up to 9. So I'm going to post a sequence, then I'll start tightening these bolts down. Okay, we're going to put the water pump on now. This is the old one. It's got 5 bolts. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we'll transfer those bolts over to the new water pump. Here's the new water pump. Genuine Honda 19200 RDV J01. This is a very popular water pump. It's used on a lot of cars. There it is. And notice on the back it's got couple dowel pins for alignment purposes. It also has an O-ring right there. Lines up perfectly. That's why I like using Honda parts. Everything goes in flawlessly. So I've seen people ask questions about using Honda parts, and this is the reason why, because things go together well. Okay. And the torque spec is 9 foot-pounds. Alright, so we're going to replace this pulley. It goes right here. Now, a lot of Honda pulleys, if you can see right there, it says Koyo. This is a Koyo pulley. So I never buy the Honda part, because it's just going to say Koyo on it anyway. So what I normally will do is I will cross-reference to find the Koyo part number. So this is the Koyo part, LAT1033C, made in Japan. And Koyo, right there. So I have not opened this yet. We're going to find out together if this is the right part. Alright, so I'm going to open this up. Pull this out. Yeah, I think the color is the only difference. Yeah, it says Koyo, Japan, right there on the front. And other than the color, they are identical. Alright, so there is a sleeve that goes right in here. So I'm taking it off the old one. I'm going to put on the new one. It appears that there's some sort of lubricant on here too. So you may want to put some sort of a lubricant, maybe like a 3M silicone paste or something like that. Just going to put it in here. Alright, so I've got the bolt here. Just going to put that through here. And this goes on like right there on the water pump. And that's a 14, torque spec is 19 foot-pounds. Alright, so here is the tensioner that I pulled off the side over here. We're going to replace that. Here's the brand new one. Again, I got this on eBay. This is a genuine Honda. Got this for $45. If you buy these from the dealership or from the online dealers, you're going to spend quite a bit more. Part number is 14520, RCA A01. You can reuse these. I would only reuse the tensioner if, for example, I have to take the timing belt off for a specific reason. Maybe I had to do some adjustment or something happened, and the timing belt only has, say, a few thousand miles on it. It doesn't make sense to replace the tensioner. In our case, we don't know the state of this tensioner, so I'm not going to reuse it. So if you were to reuse this, how you would do that is you'd have to press this down in a hydraulic press and then put a pin right through here to hold this in. This one comes with a pin in the top. So you don't want to take this pin out until the timing belt's installed. So we're going to leave that pin in there. These two bolts. And the torque spec is 9 foot-pounds. Alright, so while I'm here, I'm going to put these other components back on the front. So you've got this gear. Now, the metal key that goes in there goes right there. Keeps our crankshaft aligned with the timing and everything. That I have left out. I've put that away in a safe place. I'm not going to put that in just yet. But don't forget that if you do take this out. And then we've got our sensor that goes on this side. Goes right on there, I believe, like that. Right, then this bracket goes over top. I was looking around for the bracket. I had it in my left hand. That was kind of strange, but okay. And you can tighten these down to spec if you'd like. It's probably like around 9 foot-pounds since it's a 10 millimeter. There we go. Right, that's back in place. Alright, so I'm making an attempt at removing the cover in the rear so that I can change out the rear main seal. So I need to lock the crankshaft down. So I've got the Honda tool in there with a breaker bar braced up against the engine stand. I'm going to use a 17 millimeter 12-point socket and a long-handled ratchet to break these loose. Now the one thing is, if you're going to replace the rear main seal, you're also supposed to replace this drive plate. I was not aware of that until I looked in the service manual. So I'm going to move ahead anyway. If I have to replace the drive plate, I'm going to check and see how much it is. I'm hoping it's not too expensive. Otherwise, I might just reuse the one that I have here. This one here is already loose. I'm going to come around to this one. Get it nice and square on there. There we go. Those things are tight. So we got 2, and there are 8 of them. So this area right here, I can only access 2 bolts. I could probably get a couple more from below, maybe, like this. See about that. Okay, that's loose. That's loose. So I've got 4 loose. I'm going to rotate the engine and then I'll get the other 4. That's loose. So we've got these 2 left up here. Okay, we got just this one left here. Alright, so they are all loose now. Good. Okay, so I'll just spin them all out now by hand. Okay, there's a spacer that goes on the outside. That's the back side of it. So I'm not sure that it matters which way it goes, but I'm just going to put it back in the way it came out. Take the plate off, hopefully. I'm not sure if I have enough space, but we'll give it a shot. There we go. And that's out. A little bit of work, but it came out. So I'll take a look once I get this cover off, but it looks like we might have made a good choice in removing the cover and replacing the rear main seal, because there's quite a bit of residue up here. You can see it's pretty wet too. So I'm not sure if it's coming from the cover, maybe the sealant behind it. So it looks like there is some RTV or Honda bond on here to hold the cover on and provide a seal. The rear main seal itself does not appear to be leaking, but we're going to go ahead and replace it anyway. Alright, so we're going to go after these 10s. There are, looks like 3, 4, 5, looks like 8 of them. I'm going to try this Pittsburgh tool out that I bought. It's been sitting in my drawer for a little while. See how well it does. So I've got a funky socket on there. Supposedly it's like a 12-point. This is 10 millimeters. Okay, so they are all loose. I'm just going to take them out now. All right, all the bolts are out. So I'm looking for pry spots. There's one right there. And it looks like one possibly here. And one on this side right there. I didn't realize it, but there are two bolts right here that go through the oil pan and into this cover. Did not see that. So I need to take these off. These are 10 millimeters. That's a long one. So that is off. So we have to pry over here and kind of swing this out, it looks like. That's one way to get it off. So the reason why I wanted to take this off, you can see there's the seal, and then there's an O-ring right up here that also leaks. So while it may have seemed like a little bit of extra effort to do that, it's probably something that should be done. Alright, so I am going to pull the oil pan off. It just makes sense to do that at this point because as I start to scrape that sealant off, it's going to fall inside the oil pan. So I'm just going to take the hit now, take the oil pan back off, scrape all the gasket material off, put the cover back on with a new rear main seal and an O-ring, and then put the oil pan back on. Okay, so I'm going to get the seal out now that I've cleaned this up. Let's see, the surface is nice and clean there and back here. So I'm just going to kind of knock this out with the screwdriver. This is a broken screwdriver that I use all the time, kind of a throwaway. And then I've got a sledgehammer and some blocks of wood. I'm just right inside this lip, right where the metal part is there. So there's metal backing this seal. There we go. There it is. So I have to clean this up a little bit. Alright, so here's the new rear main seal. Part number is 91214 RKG 003. Alright, a little bit of engine oil. Put it in with my hands first. Get it started that way. Alright, so I've got a block of wood. Let's see how this goes. And this side here. That looks pretty good. Yeah, I think I'm going to call that done. Okay, so we're ready to put the cover on. There is an O-ring that goes up here that needs to be replaced. Part number is 91308 P3R T01. And I'm not sure this is going to stay in place, so I may put a little bit of Honda Bond on here. Let's see. Yeah, I'm a little skeptical about that. So I might put a tiny bit of Honda Bond, like maybe in 4 corners or in 2 corners at least. It's just a tiny bit here and over here. Do it 4 corners. That should keep it in place. And then I'm going to go around the whole cover. You can see it's marked out. That black line all the way around. All right. I think that's enough. Got to work a little fast here. Cap on. Go ahead and put this on the back of the engine. Also, it's probably a good idea to put a little bit of engine oil on the interior of the seal. Okay, one dowel pin in. There we go. That is a pain, especially when you got the stand in the way. All right, so I'm going to quickly get the bolts in. Okay, then I'll run those down. Okay, 9 foot-pounds all around. There's no sequence. All right, we got them all. All right, let's take a look at how we did here. Looks like we got good squeeze out over here. Right up in there, right up in the top, right there. That area, remember it goes kind of underneath here. And we're back over there, that looks good. All the way down. Underneath we got some squeeze out right there. Then also on the other side. All right, so we've got the plate here. Now, I'm still not sure about whether I need to put a new one on or not. I'm going to put the old one on for now just for demonstration purposes, but I may replace this with a brand new plate. I have that on order. That should be here sometime later this week. This side goes out. There we go. All right, so I've got the plate right here. And I've got the bolts. I have numbered the bolts 1 through 8. We need to tighten these bolts in a crisscross pattern. So I thought it'd be easier just to number the heads and install them in that pattern. So I'm going to put the plate on. And I'll start with number 1 at the top here. All right, so we're going to tighten the bolts in the rear. I have locked down the crankshaft with the Honda tool. Okay, we need to tighten these down in 2 or more steps to 54 foot-pounds. I'm going to go to 27, then I'll go to 54. 17 millimeter 12 point. All right, same pattern. Now we're going to 54 foot-pounds. All right. I just have to fix this one hole for the engine mount bracket. The threads got a little stripped out there, so we'll take care of that. And this engine block is ready to go back in the car. All right, so there you have it. There's the engine block reassembly for the 2008 Acura MDX. So this is about ready to go back in the car. I still have a couple things to take care of. There's still grease and oil everywhere in the engine compartment that I got to take care of. And then also the axle in there, I need to reboot that before I can put the engine block in. So hopefully this information was helpful, and thanks for watching.